Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cryptid Women's Society. I am Lacey, and this evening we are joined by someone who's helped redefine the way that millions of people think about monsters. Not as simple creatures lurking in the dark, but as reflections of our history, our fears, our beliefs, and our cultures. Dr. Emily Zarka is a folklorist, Gothic literature scholar, educator, and the creator, writer, and host of PBS Digital Studios' Monstrum. Through the series, she explores the folklore, mythology, and history behind legendary creatures from around the world, demonstrating that monsters often reveal more about humanity than they do about the supernatural. She also wrote and hosted an award-winning PBS documentary called Exhumed: A History of Zombies, and she teaches literature and folklore at Arizona State University. Does that sound right?
Yeah, hello.
So, welcome, and I'm so excited to talk to you. You kind of were like the OG of like this like niche corner of the world that got out there into the public.
That's super bizarre to even hear you say that because this is like a journey I never saw myself going on in any capacity. And yeah, I've just went all in and I'm glad that it's paying off.
Yeah, that's awesome. So everyone has like an origin story. So what is yours? What sparked that fascination or with monsters or with folklore?
So my fascination with monsters definitely came from when I was a little girl. I would watch science fiction movies and like horror movies with my mom. Some of my earliest memories doing it and watching things like Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and Night of the Living Dead and Salem's Lot. And I always just really loved horror and felt myself drawn to it. I was reading Stephen King when I was very young as well. And it was, kind of my weird, spooky side hobby until I went and did my undergraduate work at University of Colorado. And then I read about my first like real vampire in a poem. And that turned into an honors thesis that turned into my dissertation.
That's so cool. I feel that too. Like my mom was in the Stephen King of the Month Club. And so like every month she got another Stephen King novel from the collection until she had like the entire, I mean, this like massive wall of just all of his novels.
I love that. Yeah, the shelf on my book. That's just all Stephen King. Yeah.
So at what point did you realize that monsters could become a serious academic pursuit? Like when you wrote your thesis, did you were like, this is it, this is the direction my life's going now? Or was it just, I just want to write about this thing?
A little bit of both. I went into, so I skipped my master's degree and actually went straight from undergrad into grad school, the PhD program. And I think I was a little naive about what I was getting myself into. I, had this idea in my head, I'm just going to get like a tenure track job and like no big deal. And I'll be publishing books left and right. And obviously the reality of academia is not that. So it quickly became apparent that not only did I found this niche that other people were interested in, but I knew I wanted to do more than just teach at a university. So I came up with the idea for Monstrum, actually my final year in the PhD program, and pitched it to them before I even actually graduated with the PhD, which is wild to think about. And that was, way back then that I just kind of leaned into it. And I do always like to encourage people who, if you're ever considering academia, definitely you have to study what you love. And this is what I really love because it's grueling and difficult. And if I wasn't getting to write about monsters, I'd probably be a little less happy about it.
I feel so much of myself in your story because like when my bachelor's was in health information management. Like I'm a medical coder by my day job. I didn't intend to go back to grad school, but pre-pandemic, I played roller derby, and then the world kind of shut that down, and we moved out to the country. So by the time that everything started moving again, I had retired from roller derby, and I was like, well, now I feel like I need a hobby. We're way out in the country. Maybe I'll go back to grad school because turns out you can go to grad school for anything.
Yeah.
What your undergrad was. And so I was like, what do I want to do? I would love to do folklore, but there's not really a lot of online grad schools for folklore. And so I did, I went into historical anthropology, and then I also did a cryptozoology program at the same time. And, but I just went because I just wanted to learn about this stuff. I'm interested in it. But then when I got in it, I was like, what am I going to do with these degrees? And I just graduated in May, so I'm still trying to figure that out.
Congratulations. That's incredible. Follow your passion. That's only my advice. I mean, there was definitely people who were like very well known in my field, which is Gothic literature and British Romanticism, who, flat out told me that you're not going to have a career if you continue to pursue this, which was the undead.
And usually you have to like find your own path in this. Like,
Yeah.
it's not as simple as just going to apply for a job.
No. Yeah, exactly. But I'm kind of like you, that I just love learning. And that's one thing that I really love about teaching as well, both inside the university and then outside of it with something like Monstrum. I think that there's just a lot of curious people out there. And if I can, make them more curious in some capacity and learn something along the way, then I consider that a reward for me.
Yeah. So how did your background in Gothic literature shape how you study folklore now?
I think that the best thing my PhD program did for me was teach me how to be a really good researcher, and how to ask questions, kind of like a web. I like to describe my research as a web. It's not like I'm just looking at literature. I have to look at anthropology, folklore, history, science, medicine, architecture sometimes, like the list goes on. So I think that, Gothic literature also is when we got some of our first written down stories of things like the undead, with zombies and vampires and mummies and corpses of all kinds. And of course, the Gothic genre was really shaped in the 19th century, so I think that helps me quite a bit. And, being able to go as far back as I can with all these stories about different cryptids and monsters is something I call it the research hole. I love falling into one of those that, I think I'm going to be learning about Egyptian mummies, and all of a sudden I'm reading some weirdo's, report of when he did an autopsy and tasted mummy just because you could.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so rewarding and exciting.
If someone had told you 10 years ago that you'd be like a monster expert on, like, what do you feel like you would have said?
I would just not have believed it. And I think that it's definitely a title that I kind of gave myself before I earned it. And I think, now I can say that I have, but I would not believe it at all. Again, I went to grad school. Well, I went to my undergraduate actually for journalism. And I specifically did print journalism because I didn't want to be in front of the camera. And now that's, half my job. But
also print journalism.
Okay.
Also my original bachelor's program. And I did listen to everyone who said print is dead. You're going to get no job. And so I dropped out after 2.5 years and didn't go back until I had 2 children. And so
more power to you. I don't know how you do that.
Well, when my bachelor's program, I did the first half hybrid, and my youngest was in kindergarten or in preschool. So like I would have, when he was in preschool, I would do some classes on campus, and then the rest. But then COVID hit, and so everything moved online, and I finished it all online. So, so let's talk about like how when you created Monstrum. How did that idea first come together? Like, what I should do is a TV show.
Yeah. That was probably not my first inkling. I was familiar with things like Crash Course and, this idea of like animated educational shows. And that's, again, surreal because I've actually worked with them now. But, I was not really that familiar with YouTube as a whole. But again, just really passionate about monsters and horror, and learning and reading and writing is my favorite thing to do. So I was actually chosen by ASU, where I teach now and also where I got my PhD, to be one of 3 grad students that sort of learned how to package our research in a way that made it more accessible or approachable to people outside of academia. I could throw out these poems and authors from like the early 1800s that some people would know, but most people wouldn't. And the best thing they did for us in that program is they actually had us talk to some of the business professors. To kind of, again, conceptualize our research as a product, which is something, again, I think a lot of scholars don't necessarily like to think about, and some would adamantly go against, but that framework really helped me. And I remember they were interviewing us and saying like, okay, well, what do you want to do with this? I'm like, well, of course I want to write a book. But then I would love to, be Dr. Emily Zarka, monster expert on something like the History Channel or National Geographic. And the business professor looked at me and said, why be the expert when you can be the show? And I hadn't thought that broad before, but it was that kind of head tilt moment. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So my presentation that I gave and presented in Washington, D.C., which is actually where PBS headquarters is right near there. I packaged it. I remember as I want to do for Monsters what Anthony Bourdain did for food, and show that we have more in common than we actually have different. And let's talk about it through this weird, quirky thing, monsters. So PBS.
You did that. You really were the first one like, kind of putting this out there.
I guess, which is, again, super surreal, not something that I ever would have expected. But I had no idea what I was doing. Again, didn't even have my PhD yet. PBS gave me 15 minutes to essentially cold pitch them. I had no idea what a pitch should look like. It was literally just like a Zoom conversation like this. I didn't have a pitch deck or anything. I just had, I think, passion and knowledge and, this desire to get more people interested in the humanities. And if we're going to do that through monsters, at least you're getting there.
And that probably really worked in your benefit because I'm sure it came off sincere as opposed to rehearsed.
Yes, definitely. And it's, become a skill going like something like print journalism and teaching to, being an online education creator is, definitely a different skill set and something that we actually, I don't know if I've said this before. So Monstrum actually started as a Facebook like TV program. And when PBS picked it up for the full series, they actually had me refilm the first like 4 episodes or 6 episodes or something because I just clearly didn't have the skill set yet. So we kind of refilmed it, and it's super, super surreal to, see some of those videos that from like 7 years ago are still, getting views because everything lives forever on the internet.
Yeah. What do you think makes a creature interesting enough to have an episode?
So it's kind of depends. So we have like a more formal system of how we pitch ideas, but it's kind of what it was like in the very beginning. I was like, I think this thing is super weird and cool. Like, I'm going to research it and find, a thread to connect it. So for me, a good episode is going to have a historical connection of something that can help us better understand, our past civilizations and cultures, but then something that also is still relevant today. Kind of trying to find that balance can be challenging if we're talking about something. I shouldn't even say Cyclops now, the Odyssey's out, but like trying to make Cyclops relevant for people now. And for me, at least, for educators to use in the classroom. It's kind of what drives our idea for monsters. But yeah, we've obviously covered things across the globe, across human history. We've gotten to do things like actually being on location, which is super surreal. So yeah, we're not stopping anytime soon.
So how much, has there been a monster that you wanted to cover, but you couldn't make it work, or you haven't found enough research yet, or an angle?
Yes. So there are 2, the Jersey Devil, but I'm digging my heels in because I want to actually film it in New Jersey and really kind of dig into it. Exactly. I can't do that in the studio. I want to be creeping around in the woods.
Sahara. Like it's
yeah. Exactly. So that's one. And then probably one of our most requested, because I do read every single comment on every video on YouTube that I make, is skinwalkers. But as someone who lives in Arizona and has had DNA Navajo students before, I know that that's something I would never do without permission from like elders in that community. So until I can do that, that's something that I won't touch.
So I'm in Appalachia, and that's a big Appalachian folklore as well, and that's when I get asked to do a lot when I do presentations and classes. And I am doing around Halloween, I'm doing like a spooky cryptids of Appalachia class, and that's one of the ones that I'm going to kind of touch on. But we have a lot of Cherokee and Shawnee, and we have a large indigenous history in this area too. But I feel like I can't really speak on the indigenous culture stories because I only know what I've learned as an outsider. I don't have that direct knowledge. But I also think you can't really talk about skinwalkers without discussing any kind of shapeshifter, vampires, and like I think that they're because we don't know what we don't know, and like who says that those aren't all the same things? And so I am going to approach it from the perspective of what all these things could be.
Yeah. No, I think that's smart. I mean, that's where the research element comes in. And that's why I always encourage people who, I'm sure very much like you, I've done, talks at like gaming conventions, and I'm doing another one next year. And I think I just try to remind people, like, especially if you're using any kind of fiction or folklore or story from a culture that is not your own, you need to be going directly to the source whenever possible. So that's something that actually evolved with Monstrum as we sort of got bigger and progressed, is even if you don't see them on screen, we have like content experts essentially who, will go over our episodes and point out any major red flags, not my pronunciation, which is notoriously horrible. I always struggle with that. But yeah, I think just being kind and considerate. And I always say that I'm not even the creator of these stories and these monsters. I'm just like a curator
Yeah.
of, collecting content. And one of the most, again, I think beautiful and rewarding things about having a show like Monstrum that is on YouTube and anyone can watch anywhere in the world for free is seeing comments of like, this episode was great because I got to talk to, like my aunt about X, Y, and Z, or I got to teach my kids this part of our culture that they had never heard of before. So again, I guess that's just the educator in me. That's what I really love to do.
Yeah. So how much research typically goes into a single episode?
Good question. It really depends on the monster. So what I think is really fascinating is something obviously like a cyclops, or using like big monsters, or a vampire that has so much that you have to do. Those obviously are very challenging. So when I did the Exhumed documentary, that was basically the history of zombies, right, in North America, which is crazy. And I think that was 5 months of research that I just did focusing on that. But on the flip side, something like Slender Man or digital folklore, which obviously we've been getting more into, or like the back rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would think those are easier to research because there's not as much peer-reviewed sort of resources about it, and that's what I prioritize. But I actually can sometimes find those more challenging because I have to make those connections that other people haven't done before. But I think that's also super fun and exciting. So I would say researching an episode of Monstrum could be anywhere from 3 days to 5 months.
Do you like to just share the story as it is, or do you like to try and solve the mystery of what it could have been, or could it be real or not?
Mm-hmm. A little bit of both, actually, because I think that part of what makes us human is our capacity for imagination and storytelling. And I'm certainly not one to dismiss someone's experience if they, saw Bigfoot. Like, maybe they did. I have no idea. So I do try to honor those, eyewitness accounts and the primary sources as much as I can. But I also will be like, but this, animal kind of exists in this place, or maybe this was going on culturally that might have influenced someone's perception. So it's definitely a balance, but I think that balance is important because I think that talking about monsters that way gives it more, I guess, like a positive reputation than just being like, oh, these are just spooky stories, because it's so much more than that.
I would say if these things exist, these cryptids or creatures exist, it says something about our planet, that they're still, our planet can still host them, and we haven't completely ruined it. And if they don't exist, it says a lot about us as humans and about why these stories are important to us. And so I think they're both important. There's room for both, both folklore and, true stories.
Yeah. And that's actually how I approach researching my book that's coming out next year, which is all about cryptids, 50 global cryptids. Yeah. So that was, it was very exciting and fun to, finally fulfill that dream of mine. But maintaining that balance is something that not all other books do, and was something that was super important for me.
Yeah. So what's something that viewers assume about the whole production process of putting a show together that would be not quite what they think?
I think just how much effort and care goes on behind the scenes. And quite frankly, how much my production team spots in is involved in the process as well. It's very, I call them the monstrous family I never knew that I needed, but we're very collaborative. So while I am the one, researching and writing the script, they're all in it at the same time. And each version of the script goes through at least 3 drafts, if not more than that, before we even get to our table read. And then things change, the day of as well. So I think that level of care, we have an editing team, we have our fantastic illustrator, we are, even consciously trying to source like the historic pictures that we're showing. So I think because it's YouTube, and some people, this is changing, of course, but some people have preconceived notions about like, oh, well, you just become like a content creator and like you just edit videos and throw it up and then it becomes successful. And that's not anywhere near the reality. It's truly a labor of love and something that we are all very passionate about, and something I could not do by myself.
Yeah, it takes a village.
It does.
Do you know how many episodes you have?
This is embarrassing that I don't. I want to say that we've surpassed 100, but I'm not 100% positive. Yeah.
Still, even if you're at like 92, that's still really impressive.
Yeah.
So after so many episodes, how has this show changed the way that you think about monsters?
Ooh, I think what's really changed for me is that I thought, PBS took a chance on me that I'm like this weird monster girl, and like there are other people who are into horror and stuff, but no one would really appreciate it as much I just thought it was going to be like a weird, quirky thing that I do on the internet, and didn't think it would turn out to be as successful as it is, and for some people at least impactful. And getting those emails from teachers saying that they're using this in like their high school classroom or their college classroom is something I don't think a lot of people would assume. When you hear monster, you think education. So I think that's been even surprising for me to see the kind of community that already existed, that I just got lucky enough to tap into at the right time. Outside of that, I think it confirmed something that I knew deep in my soul, even as a kid, that there's a facet of truth to every single monster. And again, I'm not saying that means supernatural. I'm not saying extraterrestrial, any of that. It could be, but I think that there's a little element of truth. And so for me, being able to dig deep and find those things is, and I would say for each episode, and that's been really interesting too.
I always say these stories are like weird games of telephone, that maybe
the
original person saw an animal that they have never seen before, that they just had never experienced, and it's just a harmless biological animal. But then they tell somebody else about it, and they say, I saw this thing, and I wasn't sure what it was, and it was weird. And they tell the next person, they're like, she saw this thing, and like it's bigger and bigger and scarier every time.
Which is great and topical right now. I'm sure you know who Jimothy is.
Oh, I love Jimothy.
I love Jimothy. But Jimothy is a cryptid.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you were at night, even myself as someone who studies this, if I saw Jimothy running across my backyard in the middle of the night, I would tell my husband, like, that's a monster. Like that's a cryptid.
Well, I'm not a zoologist, so I had never heard of short spine syndrome before this.
Same.
So I wouldn't have known. I would have been like, it looks like a raccoon, but it's tiny.
Yeah. But it's short, it doesn't make sense, but it's also cute. And I think that it's been really interesting to, like use that as an example. And I love when I can find those examples of stuff going on in pop culture. Because like you kind of alluded to, I mean, our planet is a crazy, beautiful thing, and we've treated it, some ways great, in some ways not. But I think sometimes stories with like cryptids or monsters reminds us that we don't have all the answers. And I think that that's an important message for everyone to keep in the back of their minds.
Why do you think that every culture needs these monsters, or seems to need them, seems to always like kind of adopt these monster stories?
Again, I think it's part of our human nature, not just the storytelling aspect, but I think that monsters help us define what is right and wrong, and who or what is right and wrong. So like the people in charge are a lot of the time those that are like policing the boundaries of these monsters. But you also can't have a hero without a bad guy. So I think a lot of the times monsters have been used to justify sometimes horrific things that we as humans have actually done to one another and done to the planet. So I think that they help us fill in the gaps of things. And I think that's one of the reasons why now even something like extraterrestrials is still such a hot topic of conversation, and something people are asking the government about, because we don't know that much about space, or, like about the deep ocean. And that idea of mystery, I think, is really connected to monster, and that we as humans want that possibility.
Yeah, I agree. So is there, have you found any similarities across different countries, different religions, different cultures when you're studying these things? Like, have you found one that surprises you, where you found it sprinkled in the lore?
It's not gonna be a popular answer. Colonialism. Because no, seriously, like colonizing different places, has definitely translated monsters in ways that maybe they didn't exist before. Sometimes it's created them, gave them different meaning, or quite frankly, made people scared of a person or a thing that they weren't before, for less than positive reasons. So that's honestly been kind of surprising. That and patriarchy, which I guess shouldn't be that surprising, like scary. We're actually doing an episode on this of like, why are so many more beautiful women monsters? There
are a lot of like female, I guess you would call monsters, even just evil folklore characters.
A lot more shapeshifters. A lot more sort of even witches.
Even ghost stories, like you always have the lady in white, or the banshees, or the La Llorona, and there's a lot of them.
Exactly. And I do think, again, to go back to your question, that even just seeing those connections of this like woman in white trope that exists in so many different places, or something like the undead. To the best of my knowledge, any culture that buries their dead has some kind of undead, like revenant, reanimated legend. And I think that tells us a lot about how scared we are of death, right? And how, like, again, helps explain parts of our world.
Or even like we don't like we want to believe that there's some kind of afterlife where we get to stay around and still be near our loved ones, and yeah, that makes sense. What do you think? Do you think that monsters are in general just a universal human experience, or are these like products of very specific cultural movements or moments?
I think it's both. Again, I don't think that we as humans have ever not had monsters, and I can't see them that changing anytime soon. So I would say they are definitely part of our species, but that is my favorite thing about the research, is trying to find those cultural moments and the things that are contributing to how that monster looks or acts or is portrayed in pop culture at the time. And what I love to also remind people of is, when we think popular culture today, we tend to think more like visual medium, or something like TV and movies, where pop culture existed thousands of years ago. It just looked different. So being able to find how a certain monster looked in a scroll painting from hundreds of years ago and how it's portrayed now, I think can definitely tell us a lot about that culture's history.
Yeah. What do you think? What culture has some of the most overlooked monster or folklore stories?
I wouldn't say overlooked, but I think that the internet definitely contributes to this. But Japanese yokai are so numerous and so bizarre at times, and I think that that's actually really cool.
There are some of the, like, I remember in the early 2000s there was a wave of Japanese horror movies that were being remade in by American company. I don't know if they're American companies, but American actors, like The Ring, Shudder, The Grudge, like all of those, and they were all so scary. They were really like some of the earliest like super jump scare movies, I think, that kind of took hold of us. Like they were like, now Insidious and The Conjuring and that whole like world. I feel like really like they can run because these other movies walked and like paved the way for that like creepy, spine tingly scare. And some of these stories are terrifying.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that the best horror stories come from traditionally marginalized voices. So I give a lot of credit to creators now who are trying to tell unique stories, or for platforms like Shudder that really focuses on getting diverse horror content from a lot of different parts in the world. Because I think that at least here in the United States, we, or at least at one point, did prioritize like North American monsters and what I call white people monsters, and now that's changing. And I think that that's really cool.
Have you ever found two legends that were separated by thousands of miles, or by religion, or by language, that still seem to sound almost identical?
Dragons.
Yeah, dragons are a hot now. Do you feel that because of that these stories exist on opposite sides of the world for thousands of years, even before we had a way to communicate with each other? Do you feel like that lends any credence to that maybe something, if not that exact thing, something like it existed?
Yeah, I do. And I think something, again, this is what's really interesting about dragons or cryptids, so more, of course, like animal-based type of monsters. I think that we can't dismiss the natural environment and things like the fossil record. I mean, we're still discovering species every single year.
We can't comprehend things that could have existed then that could not exist now in the world that we have now. Like even dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs are crazy. Yeah, and existed for much, much longer than we as humans have. So I think that, there's, again, a lot of questions in the world. I mean, I was just watching Planet Earth again with my son, and like, even they're so good, but even some of the stuff, like, my mind is like, I'm an adult person and I'm like watching this guppy climb up a waterfall, and I'm like, how is this happening? I think I wouldn't call the guppy a monster, but I think that at one point
imagine seeing that for the first time, not knowing what it is.
Exactly.
We have some really scary animals now that if we didn't have access to zoos and the internet like we do now, like hundreds of years ago, and you saw this thing come out of the, like if a anglerfish filmed a light on it that it just washed up on the beach, like that would be a monster now, and I know it exists.
That's what I love when people are saying, like, "Oh, do you think monsters are real?" I'm like, "Yes, in a variety of ways."
It's a very
But something
subjective term.
like the kraken,
Yeah.
giant squid exist, and they're terrifying. And I don't think they're taking down ships, but I think that there's massive giant squid.
Maybe
You
they're not
know,
now, but they
yeah,
probably have gotten
well,
smaller now than they were thousands of years ago. And maybe then they were.
hmm
And
exactly.
there were less people on the ocean then. So
Yep.
they might have been more curious about whatever this thing is. And we've probably driven them far deeper into the ocean because
hmm
we've invaded their territory.
Yeah, they're just trying to survive. So
Yeah.
I'm terrified of giant squid
There are
because I think that they're
things in the
scary.
ocean that are scarier. I say that all the time. When
Yes.
anybody asks me what my favorite cryptids are, I say sea monsters because
Yep.
anything that could possibly live in the ocean is so much scarier than anything we know
hmm
lives on land now.
Yeah. Yes.
So, what culture do you think has some of the most overlooked? Like you said, I know you said
hmm
Japanese, like you find are like the most interesting, but which one deserves more attention than it gets? Like
Mm.
one specific like lore or creature or
hmm
story. Do you feel like doesn't get enough attention?
So one of my favorite monsters of all time is actually from the Philippines, the Manananggal, which is a self-segmenting female monster that she literally detaches her upper torso and grows bat wings and flies around at night using a proboscis-like tongue to suck the viscera of sleeping people, which something like that is, I mean, incredible. But that's what I love. I love the monster. The weirder the monster, the better. And that's also so specific that I was like,
Yes.
there has to be a reason for like why this monster was created and styled to look this way. And that was one of an early season of Monstrum, but one of my still favorites so far. So yeah, I think that again, one of the good things the internet has done, I guess someone who's also on it a lot, is allow for more people to share stories from their own cultures and communities,
Yeah, you can get
not
more
just about monsters. Yeah,
stories.
exactly. So I think if you want to find weird random monsters in the world, like you just quick internet search away. And I think that that's actually a really cool and again globalizing thing, but also universal human thing.
Yeah. So, as someone who studies folklore academically, how do you
Mm-hmm.
separate what is folklore from what's a
Mm.
reported encounter or someone who says they definitely saw this?
So it gets complicated. So I would classify it as more like eyewitness accounts, and then folklore is kind of the narrative that surrounds that particular monster or maybe sighting, right? So something like Bigfoot, that's also another common thing, is these giant other sort of ape-like humans going around in the wilderness. Those first encounters, excuse me, at least in North America and even places like the Himalayas, they get more traction when they're talked about and when they're put into the media. So for me, that's when it really does become folklore, is when, like you said, the game of telephone, when people start telling the story to different people and it starts expanding. That's what makes it different from just like an eyewitness account that, oh, maybe someone saw something weird in their backyard one
Mm-hmm.
day.
Where do you think that cryptids fit in to folklore studies? Like, do you think that they are
Mm.
a separate thing, or are they the one and the same, or is it overlapping like a Venn diagram?
I think it's like a Venn diagram because I think what really at least distinguishes cryptids from different kinds of monsters for me and even from folklore is that the animal nature is like something that's universal in all cryptids, where we can't necessarily say that about something like the undead or even ghosts or witches, or I guess werewolves isn't the best example. But I think that there's that idea of possibility that separates cryptids from something that seems a little more paranormal
Like a
or
Jersey
supernatural.
Devil versus the Bigfoot.
Yeah,
Why do
exactly.
you think that we keep looking? Why do you think we're still looking for Bigfoot or still looking for Loch Ness Monster?
Because again, I think humans are inherently curious, and I think that there's we don't know as much as we probably would like to think that we do about the natural world, or even quite frankly how other people think or act. And I think that we like this idea of searching, that there's something bigger than us, and maybe that adds a little bit of additional meaning to our own lives by looking for those mysteries.
Yeah. Do you think that the modern internet culture is creating new monsters? Not in a creepy pasta type
Mhm.
way, but like, do you think these stories of
Yeah.
monsters are just like we talked about, like giving people a way to tell the stories, or do you think that they're just creating all new ones?
I think that people are creating new monsters. There's something that this was just optioned into a movie, but something like Siren Head, right, was an art project that I've actually interviewed Trevor for that has become something bigger. I think the Backrooms is another example, right? This idea of like liminal spaces isn't something that's necessarily new, but we see an uptick in people making and consuming Backrooms content during 2020 when we were, faced with these empty buildings and
Never
these, airports. Exactly. So I do think that there's like a connection. I think that we can still create totally new monsters, but I also think that the way we decide to retell different stories about monsters, even something like zombies, right, is so different from how they were originally intended, but not necessarily any less valuable than the way they look on The Last of Us versus the Haitian zombie.
What's your favorite iteration of a zombie?
I really do love The Last of Us ones because that was something, as someone who studied the undead a lot, having like a fungus be the thing that causes it, I thought was just brilliant and obviously stylistically super cool. I don't know if you've ever played the game, but the game is beautifully designed.
I'm not a gamer.
I'm not a good one, but I like to do what I said. Yeah. I set like the settings to easy, and I just really like the story. So that's definitely one of my favorite. And I do think Night of the Living Dead is one of my favorite iterations as well. Yes, Romero zombies are great, and I think he combined something that already existed with the Haitian zombie, and then added some additional like revenant sort of culture to that. And the idea that they just want to eat brains and all, I think is really interesting. But the undead have a soft spot in my heart, so it's hard for me to pick just one.
Do you feel like how do you differentiate between the mummies and zombies, like in the undead world?
Yeah, so for me, the zombie is so intricately connected to that history of the transatlantic slave trade and sort of what the people who were taken from Africa had to go through and like why they invented the zombie. To me, makes it stand out very separately from a completely different religious practice, which other cultures do mummies in different ways. So I think for me, because they're so based in different religions and cultures and places in the world, that's kind of what distinguishes them.
It is funny because I took a whole very long course on the transatlantic slave trade in grad school, and that we talked a lot about them. And I do think it's kind of funny if you look at it from a surface level, like a Hollywood level. They're not a lot different. Yeah. I mean, maybe mummies don't usually eat brains, but there's like at the base level they're pretty similar. But then when you break it down through history, they have different origins and very different backstories.
So different. And what I think is also maybe distinguishes the mummies from other types of undead, or particularly zombies, is that they usually maintain some kind of intelligence or sentience, right? Some of the earliest mummy stories we have, I could bore you all this, come from, the Gothic literature sort of section. And a lot of it was just people from Europe being like, this is a super weird thing people are doing. And like, let's use this character
like the colonization of just not understanding what they were doing. So it was scary.
Yes, exactly. And I think even looking at something like the new Mummy that just came out.
One of the most disturbing movies I've ever watched. My husband was watching. I came in halfway through it. I thought it was a sequel to The Mummy. I was like, this is nothing like The Mummy. And he was like, no, it's a completely separate movie. I said, I can't watch this. I have never felt so uncomfortable watching a movie that I felt like, other than Human Centipede, that I felt like I couldn't watch it. And this movie was...
that movie I think is terrifying, and I think as a parent it's even more terrifying. And asking yourself the same questions. That's what I think, again, what monsters do a lot is, at least for me, my favorite monsters are ones I can find a connection to or understand in some capacity. So I would say like Frankenstein's creature is a really obvious example, but as my life changes, I think that my taste in horror movies changes, and the things that freak me out more definitely change as well. But again, that's part of, I think, being human. One of the reasons why we need monsters. So maybe that goes back to one of your other questions, is like, we need these monsters to evolve, and we need to keep telling these stories so that we in turn can understand our own lives and stories better.
What do you feel like is a modern legend that you think has the greatest chance of becoming traditional folklore 100 years from now? Like, is it like a siren or
I think I'm actually going to go against some of that more digital folklore stuff, and I think I'm going to go with something like back to the movie Splice. I think this idea of genetic mutation or genetic testing and like putting different animals together and making like new species is something that definitely is going to be looked at.
Yeah,
I
because
think,
we're really doing
of course,
it. It's
coming
really
out,
happening.
yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And I think, yeah, if we're going to look back at some of those things that are being done now in the same way that a lot of people would look at Frankenstein, right? Being like, what the heck is happening? Like, why is this person doing this thing in the first place? I think that a lot of the like more tech-based monsters, maybe even something like Slender Man has longevity to it, but maybe something like Siren Head, there's a nostalgic aspect to that. But I also think it's just not going to be as scary when it's like, well, of course this is fake, or of course
So
this is
silly.
AI. So maybe that's one. Yeah, actually, AI and like deep fakes, I think is going to be something we see more
Now.
horror content
So
from. Oh yeah, it
yeah,
is.
I would
Yeah.
think that Slender Man more than Siren Head would have longevity
Mm-hmm.
because Siren Head has already affected people in the real world, like those girls that got
Mm-hmm.
swept away in it in the true crime aspect. Like
Yeah.
it's already
Yeah.
solidified its place in
Mm-hmm.
legitimate history,
Mm-hmm.
so it
Yeah.
makes it scarier.
Which is, and that's what's honestly sometimes terrifying when you are researching these monsters, and not just like I was saying, like colonialization, but something like the werewolf trials or the witchcraft trials. It's like, unfortunately, when it really directly affects a human in some capacity, I think that's when it solidifies
Yeah,
itself. Or something like changelings, right, where people were actually being murdered almost into the 20th century because someone thought that they had been swapped for another
yeah.
person, which is, again, horrible and terrifying. So yeah, I think it has to have that real human life impact to kind of dig its talons into human history.
Well, one of my favorite themes in Monstrum is what we've kind of been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
How what we talk about with monsters says a lot about ourselves at the time. So, what is the biggest
Mm-hmm.
lesson that you've learned from studying these stories?
It's hard. Again, I think the more pessimistic side of me is that humans have a great capacity to harm one another and to harm the planet. A lot of monster stories are about trying to kill the thing or restrict the thing, or I think that is the negative side. I think positive though is, again, if there's something so universal about monsters, and once you realize that, I think it shows that we're not that different. Like maybe from different culture, different time, different place, different background, but we all have like legends of ghosts, right? And I think that realizing the human nature of fear, that can be something that's actually positive. At least for me, it's really made me think differently about the world and trying to understand other people's stories and experiences with more probably an open mind than I would have been able to not talking about
Mm-hmm.
monsters. And I think that I've met a lot of people and traveled to a lot of places and just learned about these incredible histories that I don't think just Gothic literature would have been able to do for me.
You said something that made me think. Have you seen the new reboot of the Anaconda movie? So
No,
it's
I
actually
haven't.
much funnier than I anticipated it to be.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
because the old one was kind of like a drama that had some underlying comedy, but this one is
Yeah.
just a comedy, and
Straight
it's
comedy.
Paul Rudd and Jack Black, so it's very funny. But they still killed the thing in the end, and it is a big
Yeah.
scary snake, and I am terrified of snakes, even the little bitty ones. So, but still,
Yeah.
like the cryptozoologist in me when we were leaving, I was with my kids and we were talking about it. And I said, they were like, it was so funny. I was like, I'm kind of bummed out. It made me a little sad. And they were like, what about it?
Yeah.
Because it feels so real, like to what would really happen if
Mm-hmm.
we invaded this thing's
Yep.
habitat, that it was just snakes in a snake, like they're the size of a mouse to a
Yeah.
real snake. It was just trying to eat these small creatures that came into its living room, and then were mad
Yep.
that the snake was trying to eat it, and they blew it up. Like,
That's what the
and
snake
so then
does.
that's what
Yeah.
we would really do if we caught a Bigfoot, if we caught an alien, if we caught whatever it was, if we
Exactly.
found it, the chances are humans would kill it. And I just think
Yeah.
that's really sad. And
I think it is sad, and I mean there are plenty of animals that were once considered cryptids that turned out to be real that we killed off. They're actually, so for my book, I had to come up with like tips in case you encounter a cryptid, and one of them is be respectful,
Yes.
you're a guest of the locals of the land.
Yeah,
Because,
into
yeah, I
anything's
think that's,
house.
yeah, it did
Yeah.
nothing to you.
And even if it did something to
Yeah.
you, it's just going again it's following its nature. Like it's not just because
Hmm.
it's trying to harm you doesn't mean it's evil. It means it's doing what it knows to do.
Exactly. And I think that we need to remember that about both like cryptids, but also like human monsters. Is we need to be very careful about how we treat the environment and how we treat one another, or fear becoming monsters
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah, because we do know better. We know what XYZ does to the land. We know what it does to our water. And like but animals don't know better. They're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
So what monster do you think has undergone the most dramatic transformation over time since like the origin of the series?
Oh. Zombies are definitely up there. Dragons have stayed pretty much. I'm trying to think something that a lot of people would have heard of. I don't think it's. I think it's actually going back to its roots, but I'm very intrigued by the current obsession with like fae
Mm-hmm.
and fairies. This idea of like fairy romance is something people are like, oh my gosh, fairies, but we've been doing that for a very long time. So I honestly can't really think of something other than probably the zombie that's had such a dramatic
Vampires, I think, have had
difference.
quite a transformation.
Yeah. And I think we're getting back to scary
Mm-hmm.
vampires. I've done an episode about this, which I'm all about, because the original, wherever you're looking, of any kind of like life sucking or revenant person vampire, they're terrifying, and they weren't meant to be like
Mm-hmm.
sexy, alluring maybe. So yeah, I think that's been an interesting
Yeah.
tradition to follow.
Do
Yeah.
you see much difference in like are monsters that are being created in more modern times or seeming to appear in more modern times very different from monster stories that were created, in the past?
Yeah. I think that, and this is something that we can point to commercialization and a couple of other things. I think the idea of like cute monsters, or monsters not being scary, even something like Hotel
Yeah.
Transylvania, taking all these iconic monsters and making them like lovable and funny. I think that is very, very
Mm-hmm.
different. For a lot of other monster history, is sometimes honestly just about getting kids and people to like not go
Yeah,
into a
yeah.
body of water by
They serve.
yourself. So I think that's, yeah, and I think I could probably wax poetic about why I think that is. So that I think is definitely different. But quite frankly, I think that if anything, we're retelling older monster stories. I mean, just like you said, reboot, just the amount of reboots and like remaking Nosferatu and doing the Mummy and these different interpretations of these kind of more common monsters. We're telling the same different stories using
Different
the same
font, same
characters.
words, different font.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Why do you think that we love to scare ourselves? Why do we like to be scared and tell these monster stories?
Yeah. So there's two different like general psychological theories for this, and so one is that it's a biological evolution holdover. That when we were more hunter gatherers and dealing with real giant like predator animals that had more of a, I guess, daily
Mm-hmm.
threat to us, that some people argue we want to scare ourselves to kind of like release that as part of like our species. And I think that's part of it, but I think the other part for me is that horror and fear is
Mm-hmm.
educational. And I think, again, this is not like a new idea by any means, but I think there's something cathartic about seeing a dangerous situation play out when you're not the one who's a part
Yeah,
of
it's
it.
like a controlled
And I
environment.
think that, yes, and some people have actually done studies about this that, I think during the pandemic, for instance, like people who consumed a lot of like zombie and horror content didn't panic as much,
Mm-hmm.
as people who
I
didn't,
can see
right?
that.
Because horror and that idea of fear, and being able to see fear through a lens, where we're not actually in danger, I think is something that keeps us coming to it. And I mean, again, the surprise thing, I think that there's something to be said about, wanting that jump
Yeah.
scare, like waiting to see if you could be the one to figure out the movie first or the book and where it's going.
Okay, so
Yeah.
anytime I do one of these, I like to do this lightning round. Like,
Yes.
need
Oh,
your
okay.
don't
Yes.
think. Just
Okay. Okay. I'm nervous.
all right.
Okay.
Favorite monster?
Zombie.
Monster you definitely would never want to meet in real life.
Kraken.
Yeah. Monster you would love to meet.
I think I'm. Oh, Frankenstein's creature.
I just went to the Universal monster experience in Vegas last week.
Oh, you
And
did?
one
How
of the
was it?
little haunted houses is all the classics. So like you go through and
That's
Frankenstein's
incredible.
there bringing the monster to life, and the bride's there, and the creature from the Black Lagoon, and Vampire
So
Dracula,
cool.
and
Yeah.
Quasimodo, and it was the rest of them were really jump scary, like The Exorcist and the Scarecrow and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Raccoon City zombies, Resident Evil.
Oh, yes.
But and they're very jump scary, but I love the classic Universal monsters so much that I was so like smiling through the whole thing.
In awe.
I was just so excited to see them.
I love that.
Okay. Favorite horror novel?
Oh my gosh. The Only Good Indians.
I've not read that one. Favorite horror movie?
It's delightful. Favorite horror movie? It's like asking me to pick a favorite child. It's like giving me anxiety. Tie between Halloween and 28 Days Later.
Very opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Vampire, werewolves, or ghosts?
In terms of who I would want to meet, or which one am I most scared of?
Whatever way you interpret that question.
I think ghosts are 100% real, so ghosts.
Favorite piece of folklore you've ever discovered?
The Mononongal is probably the best.
Monster deserves a blockbuster movie.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think of one that hasn't been done yet that I really like. Ooh, I know they've done a couple, but like they've done Changelings recently. I honestly don't know. That one's Unicorn. Actually, scary. Have you
seen the new Paul Rudd Unicorn movie?
No, I haven't. That's right. They did make it scary in that one.
Disturbingly scary. How the first half of the movie is so boring that you feel a little bad because Paul Rudd's so evil that you're like, I don't know if I can make it with this movie. But then the evil, not really evil, but like the unicorns come in and they're scary unicorns, and then it takes off, and you're like, okay, this took a turn, and it's definitely.
That was something so surprising to me when I was researching unicorns. I'm like, oh my god, unicorns were like actually terrifying and not like all rainbows. So yeah, give me more scary unicorn
Did you ever see The Last Unicorn, like in the 90s?
No, because I remember a lot of people I knew were like traumatized.
So scary. It is so. I remember one of my favorite movies as a kid. When I watched it with my kids as an adult, I was like, this is traumatizing. Like, I do not remember it being this dark.
There are some movies, particularly I would say from like the 80s and 90s, that are extremely dark
and inappropriate. Like, we're like, I can't. Our parents cannot watch these things. Like, these are not children's movies.
Some hold up though. I know Halloween Town.
Oh yeah,
that definitely. Even my son has seen that one.
Like 2 weeks ago. What's a monster that's been ruined by Hollywood?
Ruined? Oh, people are gonna hate me for this. Vampires?
I think my area hates me more because my answer is Mothman.
Okay, I do love Mothman. But see, Mothman to me is like cute.
I separate Mothman into two different Mothman. Like in my head, there's like the fun pop culture Mothman, and then there's the Mothman that I think might actually have been.
Like Portent of Doom. Yeah,
the one that I think might actually have been what people were seeing, and then the one with the shiny silver statue with the big butt that everybody thinks.
The big butt. I remember when I went and saw that statue, I was like,
that's very close. That's like the closest cryptid town to where I live. So like that's like 40 minutes away from here. So
have you been to the festival?
I went last year for the first time to the festival. I've been to Pleasant several times. Love the town, Point Pleasant. So fun. The festival, I will not take part of again. It is worse. Like, the crowd is. The Disney World was less crowded. It was so intense that I was like, I can't take this.
No, thank you. The empathic side of me would be like, I'm overstimulated.
And they would like take one step away from me, and then they would just get swallowed up by the crowd. It's like reaching in the ocean, like yanking them back. So stressful. But I love to go on like a random Tuesday. There's so much fun to do there. Okay, what's your favorite episode of Monstrum?
I'm actually going to say our Hatman sleep paralysis episode. It's the one we just won a Webby for, but that is also the one I got to kind of include my brother in. So I would say probably the Hatman currently.
And what's one monster story you desperately want to tell? I know you said Jersey Devil. Are there any others?
I did say Jersey Devil. Yes, there's one that I think I've finally convinced them to let me do called The Black Annis, who was, or Annie, she was a hag witch character who would skin her victims and hang their skins from a tree. And again, that one seems so interesting, and I think it's going to be both very creepy and also really cool to research.
So what's next for you? Is the book the next thing on the horizon, or do you have things in between?
It's just teaching, still doing Monstrum, still, making some appearances and stuff, but yeah, still going full speed ahead. And yeah, the book comes out again next year, and, we're already doing pre-orders, and so I think that's going to be a really interesting kind of different journey to go on. So yeah, I'm always busy.
Are there any dream projects you'd love to create if budget wasn't a concern?
Yes. I would absolutely love to work on, I did actually do some consulting for my first feature film, but doing something that maybe is one of those iconic Universal universes, and being able to get contribute to the writing or creation of one of those stories, I think would be something super cool. So yeah, big budget. Let's hire Guillermo del Toro. Let's do the Scary Unicorn movie. Let's do it.
I would love to have even the tiniest part of a hand in a del Toro movie.
Right.
So, what
I did hear, but maybe you'll be impressed with this. I did hear that at least Monstrum's Frankenstein episode was definitely discussed on set, and people were aware of it. So,
that's so cool. So, what advice would you give someone interested in studying folklore professionally? I didn't write this question with myself in mind. However, not also included in that group.
Yeah. I would say don't pigeonhole yourself or your research. So don't just look at folklore, don't just look at oral tradition, don't just look at visual media. You have to kind of be very all-encompassing, I think, to sort of truly understand these stories. And of course, being open-minded, and don't be afraid to ask for help, especially if it's something that you don't fully understand.
Yeah. Okay. So if there's one thing that you hope viewers take away from your work, what would it be?
Monsters have meaning. That, again, it's not just scary stories, that we are doing something really specific and, good and bad, telling some very deep truths about our world with our monster stories.
Okay, well, I hope that everyone, if they haven't already seen your show, I can't imagine, if they're watching this, I feel like most people that are involved with the Cryptid Women's Society are probably familiar with your show. But we do have people all over the world in our organization, so they don't all have access to PBS, so... now that they will go, if they haven't watched it already, I know it's right up their alley. I hope they go watch it. But tell us where everyone can find you on social media. Tell us your website where we can pre-order your book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so my website is dremilyzarka.com. You can find all the latest episodes of Monstrum both on pbs.org, but also on the PBS Storied YouTube channel. So very free and accessible. And you can find me on all the various socials as Dr. Emily Zarka.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out.
Of course, this was great.
Maybe when your book comes out, we can do this again, and you can.
I would love that. I know I'm trying to keep my cryptid content down, so I'm saving stories.
I can't wait.
The time I saw Jackalope.
Awesome! We don't. People don't really talk about Jackalope all that much anymore.
Honestly, one of my favorite cryptids.
Yeah, and I know that. Yeah. It was a hoax. I know that it came. I still think it's a really cool story, and I think that there's something in it about that speaks about who we are, because they were never hiding that it was a hoax. From the beginning, they were like, "We're making these," and everyone was like, "We're in for it. We're here for this story.
We're still
going to go into it." So I don't know what it says, but I feel like it says something about us.
I love that.
Well, I will let you go, and won't keep you any longer. But thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Thank you. Oh, this is great. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Yeah. See ya.